Previously, on Secrets, Crimes, and Audiotape.
You said you had something to tell me.
Murder of old lady. I know who did it.
Who?
Man across hall.
The Hermit.
Hermit, yes. I saw him. The day old lady died, I see him coming out of her apartment.
Meanwhile, I was having a sniff around. That's when I smelled it. The familiar smell. I couldn't quite place it.
Are you okay?
I am fine, George.
Have they forced you to sign a statement?
I told the truth. How I was supposed to be mystery shopping at the time of Mrs. Chase's murder, but I went for a walk in Central Park instead.
From Wondery, this is Secrets, Crimes, and Audiotape. I'm your host, David Reinstrom. What's your secret? My secret is that I have deduced that you, in fact, are the killer. Hands in the air, you monster! Our story of murder concludes this week with part 3 of Upper West Blues, a black cat murder mystery by Marcy Cahan. First, though, let me tell you about Tripod. Do you like podcasts? I kind of assume you do if you're here. If you don't, this is a little awkward. But let's move forward on the assumption that you do like podcasts and that you want to share them with the people in your life. So, do it. Tell a parent or a relative or a friend about a podcast you love. Share that biz and tell that person that podcasts, much like love, don't cost a thing. Hashtag Tripod, as in, try a podcast. Where were we? Ah, yes, Upper West Blues, the story of a New York City apartment torn asunder by murder. Only one man has the smarts, intuition, and patience to catch the killer, and that man is a cat. This is part 3 of Upper West Blues, so if you're just joining us, you can get caught up by listening to the first 2 episodes earlier in your podcast feed. Accusations fly, hackles are raised, and claws are bared in this final part of our detective mystery as Louis the feline sleuth closes in on the killer. The final order of business is to answer the question, cui bono? Who benefits?
Okay, so we'd solved the mystery of the Hermit, but we were no closer to finding the killer. Ellie was still in police custody. George went to visit her the following morning. He didn't take me with him, but I can just imagine the scene.
You actually spoke to Hermit?
He has an excellent alibi. He was with Dr. Loeb.
They are lying.
I don't think so. Who benefits?
What?
Who benefits from the death of old lady Chase? That's the key question.
Hermit is crazy. He goes into apartment, knocks her on the head out of madness.
That's what the killer wants us to think.
Hermit is killer.
Ellie, you said you brought Mrs. Chase groceries on the day of the murder.
I am good neighbor.
What did you buy for her?
Tea, milk, jam?
Mrs. Chase was poisoned.
I don't understand.
You were set up. The killer knew you ran errands for Mrs. Chase. He or she substituted a poisoned jar of jam, maybe even forced her to eat it.
Oh my God.
Maybe you didn't drop your ID in her apartment. The killer may have found it or even stolen it and placed it beside the body to make sure the police would think it was you.
Who would do such a thing?
When George got home, he paced the apartment. I joined him.
Whoever killed Mrs. Chase must have spiked her groceries.
Or known her well enough to have handed her a drink.
Well, that could be anyone. Haruki or Tamaz might have substituted a lethal jar of something while she was struggling up the stairs with her bags.
Casimobi or Dr. Loeb or the Sparrows might have offered her a neighborly hot chocolate.
Boris or the Hermit could have forced brandy laced with strychnine down her throat.
And there was Ellie. George stopped pacing.
I am good neighbor. Tea, milk, jam?
Tea, milk, jam. Impossible. Not Ellie. Let's start over, Louis. Haruki, Tamaz, Boris, the Hermit. Motive, means, opportunity.
I went up on the roof to clear my head. 1 hour to midnight. The lights of 10,000 households gleamed around me. All that prime Manhattan real estate. Whew. Renters and owners, tourists in their Airbnbs, friends crashing on a couch for a night or two, and the homeless, shambling down the dark street looking for shelter. Down below, Casimobi appeared, heading home from her evening shift at the hospital. Then, 3 figures in dark coats and white scarves. Haruki's musical colleagues, laughing as they loaded their instruments into a tiny car. Across the street, there was someone in the shadows, gazing up at our building. Oh, if this were a movie, I could be down there in a flash, sniffing his shoes, like that moment when we first see Harry Lime in The Third Man. That's when it hit me. What if real life isn't like a movie? What if the killer goes free and Ellie goes to prison and the mystery is never solved? Then I reminded myself that it's always bleakest round midnight with no breakthrough in sight. A good detective never gives up. So, I gave myself a bath and got down off the roof, ready for action. Just as well, really. The following day gave me my big chance. I wasn't there for the first part of it, but I can imagine how it went. Next morning, George went over to the grocery store on Broadway to buy cat litter. On the way back, he bumped into the Sparrows.
George, just the person we need to see.
We know who did it, George. The Chase murder case.
Philip and I have been thinking of buying our apartment, the one we're renting.
A really sensible investment.
So we needed to contact the owner. Turns out the building has recently been sold.
We discovered it's owned by a company, Yasnaya Polyana Properties.
Home of the Tolstoys.
If you say so.
So we do a search for the owner. It's a company within a company within a company.
Philip is a historian. He's used to complicated documents.
And finally, we get to the actual owner. It's Boris. Boris Mishkin.
Boris, are you sure?
We can show you the paper trail. And we both realized something rather disturbing.
I was the one who realized it, Philip.
Yeah, fine, okay, Sally realized it. Now that Mrs. Chase is dead, Boris can rent out her apartment or sell it at a market rate.
Mrs. Chase was rent controlled.
Oh, so's the Hermit.
And Dr. Loeb.
But once they're dead, Boris can quadruple the rents on their apartments.
Or double the space by turning them into duplex flats. He could make a killing.
Which is why he's already made a killing.
Please, don't talk about this in the street. I'll contact the police.
So you think we might be right?
Philip, of course I'm right.
George raced home and phoned Detective Miller with the news.
What I'm saying, Detective, is that Boris Mishkin stands to make a huge sum of money from the vacancy of Mrs. Chase's apartment. He'd make even more money if he could find a way of dispatching Mr. Bartleby in 7B and Dr. Loeb in 6A. That's right. Louis, come back here.
Finally, a motive worthy of murder. Fortunately, Dr. Loeb was still alive. She was sitting in the chair behind the chaise lounge, holding a notebook. From where I perched on her fire escape, I could see a man stretched out on the sofa. No one was speaking. This is called psychotherapy.
Good couch. Solid. How much you pay?
Boris, the Russian, in Dr. Loeb's apartment.
Is money important to you?
It's important to everyone. Unless they are like you, Dr. Loeb, rent-controlled.
Tell me about your childhood, Mr. Mishkin.
Who remembers? I was child. Someone at door.
Tell me about your mother.
Why?
Please excuse me.
Dr. Loeb went to answer the door. As soon as she was out of the room, Boris swung his legs into a sitting position and surveyed the room.
Dr. Loeb, I need to talk to you.
I am with a patient.
I'm afraid this can't wait. Are you aware that your apartment has a new owner?
Yasnaya Polyana Properties. It is irrelevant. My apartment is rent-controlled.
Yasnaya Polyana Properties is owned by Boris Mishkin. He would stand to gain a great deal of money from the vacancy of your apartment, Dr. Loeb, and Mr. Bartleby's.
What are you saying?
He's already managed to get rid of old lady Chase.
Professor Imelson, Nostrovia Merikovia.
What are you doing here, Mishkin?
Mr. Mishkin is here for a professional consultation.
Even businessmen have psychological problems.
Right. Okay, then. Sorry to have disturbed you.
Stay where you are.
Oh, why?
By this time, I had left the fire escape and was lurking behind the door of the consulting room. I had a clear view of Boris Mishkin. He was holding a single-action revolver.
You want to hear about my childhood? I tell you. 3 brothers, like Karamazovs. Sergei, Vladimir, Boris. Father tells us, Soviet system dead. Nothing matters but money. Who can grab most money? Sergei owns quarter of Mayfair, London. Vladimir half of Miami. And me, I am stuck on Upper West Side. One lousy building. Brothers laugh at me. How much rent you get, Boris? Ah, they know my hands are tied. Lousy rent control. Who can blame me if I am bold? Who dares to tell me I did wrong?
You did wrong.
Boo-hoo, I did wrong. I killed you, I killed doctor. Taxi to airport. New life in South America.
There is no need to kill anyone. You are a very sick man.
Me? I am in excellent health. Never better. Time for you to say bye-bye, Upper West Side. Bye-bye, life.
That's when I signaled my presence. It wasn't bravery, animal instinct. Anyway, I have 8 lives. George and Dr. Loeb, as far as we know, have just the one.
Louis, get lost!
How did the cat get in here?
Cut! Impossible! I liquidate him!
When in doubt, go for the jugular. That's the vein running in a vertical direction down the side of the neck. A jugular puncture leads to significant loss of blood, hypovolemic shock, and eventually death.
I've got his pistol!
George knows nothing about handguns.
Police! The place is surrounded.
Police! Detective Miller!
Professor Anderson! Dr. Loeb, are you okay?
Just dandy. There's your killer. A classic case of metropolitan greed, fueled no doubt by a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Rubbish. This is a clear case of sibling rivalry.
On the contrary, a textbook example of hardwired evolutionary territoriality.
You are forgetting the Adlerian inferiority principle. Murder as psychic compensation.
My dear Dr. Loeb, you are 60 years out of date.
Evolutionary mumbo-jumbo.
Psychotherapeutic voodoo.
Voodoo?
That night, George and Ellie and I celebrated with a candlelit steak dinner.
To you, Ellie, and your dancing career.
Oh, I don't know. I may go back to Poland for a while.
Why?
Or London. I have always wanted to spend time in London.
Is it wise to keep changing cities? I mean, you need to stay in New York. Give yourself the chance to build a life here.
What a clever man you are, George. My savior.
Louis is the clever one. He was the one who led me up to Dr. Loeb's apartment in the nick of time.
Handsome Louis.
Oh, you should have seen him. Spreeing on Boris. He doesn't miss a trick.
Clever Louis.
And we all lived happily ever after. Only we didn't. Because when Ellie leaned down to stroke me, I caught a whiff of something familiar. The scent I'd identified twice before when I sniffed the corpse of Old Lady Chase, then later in Boris Mishkin's apartment. Flowers and lemon. Ellie's perfume.
Louis! Bad cat!
It's okay. He's had a big day.
I might have known. We've watched enough film noir, George and I. The beautiful dame always moves in for the double cross when you least expect it.
Here, Louis. Some extra special pate.
Extra special strychnine.
Louis, what's gotten into you?
I'll put it in his dish. Maybe he'll have it later.
Yeah, you wish.
Dizzy.
You all right?
It's all the excitement. Being free again. Perhaps I go upstairs and lie down.
You can rest here.
No, really.
Yeah, that's right. Poison the cat, then go back to your lair and plan your next homicide.
Stay where you are, Miss Krajewski.
Good evening, Detective Miller.
What are you doing here, Miller?
You were right about Boris Mishkin, Professor.
I know I was right.
But you weren't supposed to know that he had an accomplice. Somebody young and attractive to help him set up his real estate company.
Ellie?
His signature's all over Mishkin's papers.
That's true. I signed papers for him. I was being helpful neighbor.
She was being helpful neighbor.
Oh, she's helpful, all right. Delivering the poison jam to old Mrs. Chase.
How was I to know it was poisoned?
Boris Mishkin will testify that the poison jam was your idea.
Fine, let him testify. I'd like to meet a jury that will believe Mishkin.
But Miss Krajewski has a track record when it comes to poison. Our colleagues at Interpol would like to have a word with her about the mysterious death of the reclusive millionaire Alexander Nowak.
I had nothing to do with that.
You worked as a cleaner in the private hospital room in Warsaw where he died. We have reports that you were behaving suspiciously.
Nothing was ever proved.
You then moved to Vienna where you befriended the widow Selma Gruber shortly before her mysterious death.
I was very fond of Frau Gruber.
You were overheard encouraging Frau Gruber to change her will in your favor.
Nothing was ever proved.
Then Paris, where you worked as a housekeeper for a Monsieur Alphonse Givernet. That was a good job in a secluded mansion.
Monsieur Givernet was very frail. He died of natural causes.
He died of strychnine poisoning. The French police were closing in, so you decamped to New York, where you hooked up with Boris Mishkin.
That's true. I met Boris. He took me to restaurants, caviar and vodka. I don't even like caviar. He let me stay in apartment 4A, rent-free. He gave me money for dance classes. He told me to make friends with Mrs. Chase, pick up groceries for her.
Ellie, stop it. Stop talking.
I'm so tired, George. You don't know what it's like moving from country to country.
Always one step ahead of the law.
It was obvious that this dame was crooked as a corkscrew. Only George was in denial.
I don't believe any of this.
We can show you the paperwork, Professor.
If only I'd met you first, George. We could have gone to hear jazz every night. You could have taught me things.
I can still teach you things.
The day Mrs. Chase died, Boris had me deliver the jam. She thought I was being kind. After I left, he went in to make sure she was dead. He bashed her head with the candlestick. Then he dropped my ID in her apartment. Boris wasn't going to share his money with me. He needed me out of the way.
No. Boris forced you to do it.
Nobody forced me, George.
Ellie.
All I ever wanted was a life in New York, New York, with a wonderful man like you. An Upper West Side life. A quiet life. You're a clever man, George. Maybe you have scientific explanation.
She nodded to Miller. Then she walked out of our lives forever. The thing about femme fatales, if you're not careful, they can be fatal. George turned off the music. He had the stoical look of the great Humphrey Bogart at the end of Casablanca.
Louis, I think this is the continuation of a beautiful friendship.
Three months later, the Sparrows have returned to London. We had a postcard.
Hello, George. Hello, Louis. I've just reached the year 1838 in my Edgar Allan Poe research. Sally is doing hot yoga.
As for the other tenants, Casimobi is still nursing. Dr. Loeb is still psychotherapizing. Tomaz has obtained a work permit. Don't ask me for what. Haruki is playing even stranger instruments these days, but it's fine. The new tenant below him is a hedge fund manager. He's never home. Jason in apartment 4 came back for a few days, then left for Berlin. Nobody ever sees the Hermit, except me, of course. One day last week, George was pacing up and down, thinking. I was, as usual, batting a stuffed mouse across the floor, just to keep in training.
What do you think, Louis? Why do we love? Why do we kill? In terms of aggression, our bodies make numerous internal adjustments in response to threats. Say a tiger is about to pounce. This stimulates the inner core of our adrenal medulla, releasing adrenaline and norepinephrine into the bloodstream. But what about calculated aggression, premeditated murder? Boris presumably loved Ellie until she got in the way of his territorial ambitions. So what was the significance of his love for Ellie, or my love for Ellie? There was the halo effect, of course. My human tendency to assume that a woman with one good trait, attractiveness, is likely to have others, like moral probity. Ellie seemed to think it was a matter of timing. In Ellie's brain, Boris seemed to be a wealthy, high-status mate in spite of his volatility. Then I came along. Ellie's brain registered that I wasn't wealthy, but I am high status and smart and likely to be nurturing of any offspring, based on her observations of my interactions with you, Louis. I hear that? The new tenant in apartment 4A.
We let 10 minutes more go by before George decided it was time to protest in person. I followed him upstairs. I'm still curious to meet new people.
George Imeson, I live below you.
Oh, hi. I thought the apartment below me was empty.
3B is empty. 3A is occupied by me.
I am so sorry. Oh, what an adorable cat. Oh, he's purring. Isn't he adorable? Aren't you just simply adorable?
He is kind of cute.
You said your name is George?
George Imeson.
I'm Olivia.
Hello, Olivia.
Here we go again. 1 life down, 8 to go.
With the killers in custody and the hope of romance renewed, we leave Louis, George, and Olivia. Another evening in the brownstone corridors of the Upper West Side as we pull away and fade out. I hope Upper West Blues has vaulted to the top of your favorite mysteries in recent memory, but I'd love to know what else you like. Tweet your favorite mystery novels, radio shows, television shows, podcasts, or films at us. We're at Secrets Crimes on Twitter. To start you off, I can tell you that I'm a big fan of Nero Wolfe and Phryne Fisher. Coming up, more of my conversation with the wonderful Marcy Cahan, the playwright behind Upper West Blues. But first, it's scenes from the next series on SCA, Sight Unseen. Amanda Houston is a young, popular amateur surfing champion. After tragically losing her sight in a terrible car accident, she begins to develop mysterious and frightening powers. Take a listen.
I love this car!
Aren't you going a little fast?
No, we who own convertibles do not drive slow.
Oh my God!
I just started my senior year in high school. I have a gorgeous boyfriend and some of the coolest friends in the world. I'm an amateur surfer, rising in the ranks. I've got everything I could ever have wanted, and then some. And now my life, as I know it, is over.
Amanda, you've got to get into your bed.
Amanda, we're just gonna help
said,
you.
leave me alone!
Now, let's hear more of my conversation with Marcy Cahan. The hero of our story, Louis, is based on Marcy's ambitious, clever old cat of the same name. I asked her about him. So I was curious, I didn't realize that your cat was named Louis. As we were batting emails back and forth, I noticed that your Google profile image is of a beautiful black cat. That's Louis?
No, that is not Louis. Dear Louis died in 2014 and has been replaced by another beautiful black cat named Max, who tells me he has no interest in detection whatsoever.
So is Louis the cat, the character, named for your cat?
Yes. Louis was alive and living with me in 2008, and I based Louis' personality, or projected onto Louis for my character.
Imagine being the brightest private investigator on the block. Then imagine being treated with the kind of contempt usually reserved for some inbred Burmese blue.
Louis lives with a cognitive neuroscientist named George, because I wanted to have a lot of neuroscience jokes about George pacing up and down the flat, trying to get to the truth of human consciousness and how human consciousness works. And as he's doing that, he doesn't realize that his cat is fully lucid and, fully comprehending everything that's going on.
Imagine, Francis Crick says, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. As Lewis Carroll's Alice might have phrased it, you're nothing but a pack of neurons.
So that's just a kind of extra intellectual joke.
So there is a little bit of self-insertion in Upper West Blues in the character of Jason.
In apartment 3B across from us, he writes opera librettos and has houses all over the world.
Very much so. That was another joke. I come back from an opera writing residency, and so the joke was that there was this man who is such a successful opera writer that he has houses all around the world.
I thought that was hilarious. Like, how many people like that live in New York? One?
This is it. I think how many people like that are in the world?
Yeah.
I mean, 3? Yeah.
Professor Imeson, this is Mr. Bartleby.
Bartleby was sitting at attention on the sofa. He held himself with a stillness most humans can't manage.
I needn't tell you who he is.
Mr. Bartleby, you live in apartment 7B.
That is correct.
But we seldom see you.
Never, if I can help it.
I thought it would be interesting if somebody in this very busy urban building had effectively dropped out of the London world. And in fact, the Hermit is living a rhythm in counterpoint to the other tenants. He goes out at night and he stays in and I guess just sleeps or thinks by day.
Is there a reference going on with Kasimobi, the Nigerian nurse?
I was doing my shift at the hospital all day. I did not know Mrs. Chase.
She is representative of the immigrants. There are millions of immigrants who come to London and New York and contribute to the community and do essential jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing a contemporary piece about a world city, you have to have people from different nationalities. I mean, granted, that may be changing in the short term. We're leaving the European community, and there's a big revision of our immigration policy. But every time you turn on the television or read the newspaper, it's reiterated that we need the Kathy Mobies of this world.
Ellie's weapon of choice is strychnine poisoning. Boris prefers a less gentle touch.
He died of natural causes.
He died of strychnine poisoning. The French police were closing in.
This is a weird question, but what is your favorite method of murder?
I can't say that I personally have one, in that I'm capable of imagining a character and then figuring out what they would prefer. But I've never. I think I have a book. I have the crime writer's handbook to murder weapons, poisons, and pathology. And it's a book that I've consulted, but I've never consulted it with a view to actually bump someone off myself. Having said that, I find this statement immensely reassuring, because one can get angry at somebody, think that one wants to murder them, but that's as far as I've ever taken it. I've never planned a murder myself.
Is there anything more suspect than a crime writer's Google search history?
Yeah, probably someone who is doing a thriller about terrorists. I would think that would be so difficult and problematic that in a way, before you did it, you'd want to go down to your local police station and say, hello, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I'm going to be looking at.
From my research, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe the first radio play of yours that was ever produced was 1985's The Contemplative Life, which starred the late Alan Rickman as a, quote, homicidal Benedictine monk.
Yes.
Is that true? Is that the case?
That is the case. That is the case. And Alan Rickman...
What can you tell me about that production?
Alan Rickman was a great friend and mentor to me. And so when I came down from Oxford, he was an incredibly generous man to other writers and actors. And I was in fact resident on his sofa for several years. I mean, I would go off and do other things.
Oh, wow.
But I was actually his kind of resident writer. And had the idea for the contemplative life for many, many years, from my teenage years, that to do a kind of murder in the Benedictine monastery would make wonderful radio. And I was working on it, and one day he went off to the BBC, the broadcasting house, to do a radio play, and he came home, and I said, Alan, I finished it, here it is. And he said, well, the play that we've just done was so bad that the actors were rewriting it in the cafeteria during lunchtime. So let me have a look at your play.
Oh, my God.
It can't be any worse than the one I've just done. And he read it.
Inspiring words.
He read it, and the next day he went back to Broadcasting House, and he handed it to the producer he was working with. And the rest is history. That was the beginning of my career. She handed it...
That's amazing.
I know. She handed it to the script editor from Radio 3, which was the classical radio station, because they thought it was too highbrow for the main radio station. Mm-hmm. And he bought it, and then they called me and they said, who do you want to play the homicidal Benedictine monk? And I said, Jeremy Irons, because I've been watching, Boris had Revisited was on at that time, and I said, I think Jeremy Irons would do it well. And they said, but aren't you great friends with Alan Rickman? And I said, yes, of course I am, but that would be nepotism. He was the person who gave you the play. And they said, no, we think Alan would be wonderful. And so that was the first one.
So, Marcy, I have just one more question for you. Are there more Black Cat mysteries that you wrote with this character?
Louis, the ones that I've now, that I've done for the BBC and I've done for the interview, so far that's the only one. I think I have a fantasy that people are going to hear Upper West Blues, the clamor for more Louis adventures. And if
I would listen to another Louis adventure.
I would happily write another Louis adventure, because this is a variegated apartment house. There's a lot going on here, and there could be another murder any second if I put my mind to it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marcy. And thank you, Secret Keepers, for listening. If you haven't done it yet, subscribe now on iTunes, Stitcher, the Wondery app on Android, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find a link to subscribe to Secrets, Crimes, and Audiotape, and more information on the episode notes. Simply tap or swipe over the cover art. You will also see how to follow us and some offers from our sponsors. Please support our show by supporting them. We'd love to hear from you. Please complete a small survey at wondery.com/survey. And please won't you rate and review us on iTunes. Be sure to tell your friends and show them how to subscribe. Upper West Blues was written by Marcy Cahan. In Upper West Blues, Louis was played by Steven Weber. George was played by Josh Stamberg. Ellie and Olivia were played by Moira Quirk. Detective Miller and Boris were played by Andre Soliozzo. Dr. Loeb was played by Susan Sullivan. Kasimobi was played by Inger Tudor. Haruki and Tomaz were played by Matt Wolfe. The Hermit was played by Jim Meskimen. Sally Sparrow was played by Rosalind Ayres, and Philip Sparrow by Martin Jarvis. It was directed by Martin Jarvis for Jarvis and Ayres Productions. Upper West Blues was recorded, designed, and mixed by Mark Holden for the Invisible Studios, West Hollywood. Thank you for listening to Secrets, Crimes, and Audiotape. The theme song for our series was composed by Mark Hadley. Our editor is Sergio Enriquez. Our executive producers are Jeffrey Glazer and Hernan Lopez for Wondery. Until next time, I'm your host, David Reinstrom. What's your secret?